Hello, and welcome to the podcast, Equipped to March, with WVU Chi Alpha. The hope of this podcast is to equip small groups with sound biblical teachings on God and how to walk with Him, and to equip the small group leader with the tools to lead as God has called them. We pray you are equipped and encouraged by this podcast in order that you can march well for our King on the college campus. Now, please welcome our hosts.
All right, well, welcome back, everybody, to our week 5 of our podcast thing, I think, podcast 5. It's going to be a good time. We have 2 guests. What's your name?
Jeff.
And?
I'm Dalton.
And today we're going to be talking about motive, where it's at in the Bible, what it is, why it matters to God. But first, we decided to start off with a fun question. We were talking about this earlier. I was a little tired. I was like, I got to wake up, so I need some hype-up music. And so I'm going to listen to the Battlefield 1942 theme song from the video game that I played when I was a kid, because that gets me hype every time I listen to it. But Jeff, what's your hype-up song?
It's a song by Bring Me the Horizon. It's called Can You Feel My Heart? It's a pretty good one. It's got some intense, instruments.
Yeah.
I like instruments and words. It has words, too.
That's good.
Words are good.
Yeah.
I like them.
What about you, Dalton?
You know, there's a lot of them that I like to listen to get hype. Lately, I think, though, it's been Call Me the Breeze by Leonard Skinner.
Nice. That's cool. Yeah, so going to our topic, it is motive, and the question that we're going to start with, Dalton, is can you just lay out for us, what is motive?
Yeah, so when we're talking about, what motive is, I looked up in, Merriam-Webster dictionary, kind of the gold standard, I guess, what the dictionary definition for motive is. And it's actually pretty short and simple. It's just something that causes a person to act. So, if you do something, whatever caused you to do that, that's your motive. But one practical way that we like to look at it is why do I do the things I do and who do I do them for? So it's kind of like twofold. It's like the reason you're doing something, but also, who is the motivating factor behind what you're doing.
Yeah, that makes sense. What was the first time you guys heard those two questions?
I don't know. It was definitely when I was in college. I can't think back specifically to a time that I've heard it. It's just kind of something that I've heard it so many times and I've heard it for so long that it's just whenever somebody says the word motive, I just automatically think, why do I do the things I do and who do I do them for?
Yeah.
But I can't think specifically the first time I heard it.
Yeah. Do you do either of you guys come back to those two questions fairly often, or is it you think about it once a year? You haven't thought about it since you first heard it, or how does it affect your everyday life basically?
I think in some ways for me it's more it's kind of a subconscious thing. It's not every day I here's the things I did today. Why did I do that? Who did I do it for? Not writing out a list of everything I did every day, but
yeah, that would take a while.
Yeah.
Tied my shoes.
So I tied my shoes because they needed to be tied. No, but I think it just for me is something that just kind of informs a lot of the bigger decisions that you make. At least it doesn't go down to all the little tiny details, but especially it's really important for me in those big decisions.
Yeah that makes sense. I remember the first time I heard it was probably my freshman year, even before I went through training as a freshman to be a small group leader the next year. I just heard it all, my small group leader said it, his friends said it, it was said at Chi Alpha service. And so it really has definitely helped me have a right filter of how to live my life really. Because it's those two questions really do they're at the root of what you were saying, not just big decisions what am I going to do for the next 5 years of my life, but even like what kind of person am I gonna be? Because yeah, like you said, Dalton, it's or like Webster said, it's like the underlying reason why we do anything. And so I guess, the reason why we're talking about motive today, as, kind of one of these core things that we see in the Bible is because God actually cares about motive. And so we were talking about this a little bit less yesterday. Jeff, can you kind of unpack a little bit about like, where we see motive in the Bible?
Yeah. So in the Bible, like whenever I think of, or like whenever I hear motive, I think back to Paul. And whenever he's like talking to the Galatians, he asks himself this question. But as he's talking to them, he says, am I trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? Or am I trying to please people? If I were still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ. So whenever I think of the Bible and what it talks about with motive, like that's the first thing that comes to mind is just these words of Paul, because there really is only two options when it comes to motive. Is like, am I trying to, please man, or am I trying to please God? And pretty much there is no other option when it comes to our motive. Men, like, we could be pleasing ourselves or looking for the approval of others, or it could be, am I trying to live to please God?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's kind of important to realize that when we talk about motive, it's not just, it's talking about, why we do good things and bad things. Because I think most of the time when we think about motive, it's like we mess up and we're like, oh, why did I do that? Or, why did Christopher do that to me? What was his motive for that? But we're really also talking about, we can have good and bad motives for our good actions as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what Paul is touching on there.
Yeah. I think like that's really cool. What you said like about Paul and like, he said, am I trying to please God or please man? I remember for the longest time, up until a few years ago, I realized that my view of Christianity was like rules based, and which meant that because God is Lord, I have to follow a set of rules that He gave me. Which, according to actions, I was like good to go, because I was doing everything I knew I needed to be doing. And so that was kind of like, I was still like doing good things, but I think like more than like what God wanted me to like more than like God wanted me to behave a certain way, He wanted like me to do it because I loved Him, not just because like I was following a set of rules. And so I realized that like because I was like trying to please God in a way, not like out of love, but like almost like trying to earn my salvation, it affected like my relationship with other people, where a lot of times I was like a people pleaser more than I was like caring about what God thought about who I was, or what I was doing or not doing. And so even like as someone who like grew up going to church, relationship with God, it was like, yeah, like a lot of the things that I did, I was able to see like, man, I've actually been like really trying to please people. And so it takes some time to like really see, okay, like why do I do the things I do and who do I do them for? And that's a pretty big question. It's a lot of times tough to answer. But that's like part of walking with God, is like getting to a point to where we know that we're like in love with Jesus and in the Lord, so that we're like, our motives are like from that relationship.
I think it's cool that you have a little bit of a story of a time you realized your motives weren't the best, because it's often really hard to do that. In Proverbs 16:2, it says, all a person's ways seem pure to them, but motives are weighed by the Lord. And so, a lot of times we think we're doing things for the right reason. but God knows we aren't, and he can reveal that to us, because it's really hard to do by ourselves.
Yeah, that definitely like took me a while. I mean, I was like 27 or 26, and I had like grown up in church, and so it took me a while to see a pretty fundamental aspect, like of why I was doing a lot of things and who I was doing them for. But something that we talked about yesterday, kind of just preparing for this, was our definition for love, or kind of how we best understand what love looks like as like described in the Bible. So, Jeff, can you, just say what that is and kind of say what that looks like in your life and regarding motive?
Yeah. So the definition that we as Chi Alphans, or whatever you want to call the people that are in Chi Alpha, whatever word you have for them.
People.
They are people. Sometimes they're not.
We'll find out.
But yeah, the definition that we use a lot is love is unselfishly choosing for the highest good of God and his kingdom. And basically what that has to do with motive is, well, if you call yourself a Christian and you really are trying to please God, and that is your motive, living for the approval of God and not for man, then everything that you do should be dictated by love. And this definition of love that we use, not, the worldly definition or any other definition. But yeah, if you truly do call yourself a Christian and you try your best to live as God calls you to live, then everything that you do will be painted by this definition of love, of doing, everything that you can to, grow God's kingdom and just unselfishly live your life. Because if you're living with, godly motive, then your life will be unselfish.
Yeah.
And yeah, just like, I don't necessarily think so much of like the question, like, why do I do the things I do and who do I do them for? I don't think about it like, every day. But the definition of love does like it is more like pertinent in my mind than this question. So yeah, thinking about love and thinking about, am I doing this for God and his kingdom?
Yeah.
Not so much like the question, even though they do kind of go hand in hand. Like, am I doing this with the right motive? But I do have that question or that definition of love in my mind all the time. Like, am I doing this like unselfishly? Like, am I doing this for God or am I doing this for me? Yeah. So it kind of is the question, but like not necessarily thinking about it in those exact words.
Yeah. Yeah. Dalton, can you just say the example of a selfish choice for God and his kingdom that you shared a second ago?
So kind of like a stereotypical thing, people like Christian meme pages always like to make fun of this, but like guys after youth group or church who will like carry as many chairs as they can to impress girls. And so like
it always works.
They're serving. It's never fails.
You never do.
I just need to start doing it more.
It's kind of a good example of something that you're doing. You're serving the church, but you're not doing it because you love the church and you want to, help out the church. You're doing it because you want the person you're interested in over there to see how strong you are, because you can carry 6 chairs in each arm.
That is a lot of chairs. 12 chairs.
That's.
Would you be impressed?
Yeah,
I definitely would be. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of a funny example, but I think like that like happens a lot more than we realize. I can't remember if one of you guys said it already, but just how it's tough for people to see other people's motives, but like the Lord's like completely aware of them, and so I think it's tough to see that, a lot of times where it's like, oh, this dude's just trying to show off for this girl. Maybe that's a little bit easier to see, because, people are, going to do that all the time. But there's actually kind of similar, but just way back when Jesus was alive, Matthew 6, Jesus talks about how when you pray, don't go like, wailing and flailing, in front of the whole church or, in the temple so that people can see you and like see like, oh, you're super holy because you're praying so loud or whatever. But he says like, go like in a secret place in your house so that like the Lord can see you only. And he, kind of uses that as an example. He goes on to say how if you do that in front of people, then, and you're like just wanting people to think more highly of you, then you're like, God's basically like not going to think much of that because your motive, although you might have been actually praying about some serious stuff, your motive was to like be seen by other people and be thought of as a holy person or, godly or whatever. And so in that situation, it's like, man, does that right act of prayer even please God in the first place? Because like your motive was to gain like approval of people, and that's like something pretty crazy to think about. And like kind of one of the main reasons we wanted to talk about motive was because, we see in different places in the Bible, like there and others, where like God actually cares about our motive and not just our action. Yeah.
And later, I don't know if it's in this passage or another passage, but he does say like, be careful not to like pray in front of men, like if you're seeking their approval, and because he goes on to say like, for that is the reward.
Oh yeah, it's
like,
the same place.
Yeah. Okay, I thought so. I wasn't sure. I could have just opened, but I didn't. He did. I could just cheat off of him. Yeah, but he says like be careful not to do this because that is a reward.
Yeah.
So like instead of like if we live to please man, like the approval of men is our reward, and if we live to please God, then that is our reward to get the approval of God, which is like you can't really compare the two because they're so vastly different. It's like, do I want like this old crummy like banana peel, or do I want like a 4-course meal? Like obviously like you're going to choose one,
right?
But like when it comes down to it in our hearts, like the approval of man sometimes just looks so much better in the moment than truly living for God and truly like getting a reward from him instead of a reward from people, which is more like instantaneous and like
right. Yeah.
I say it's harder to see like God's approval in the moment than it is to see like everyone clapping for you because you did something great, or like
carrying 6 chairs on each arm.
Yeah.
I'd clap for that. I would clap for that. Okay. Yeah, 6 chairs on each arm. Clap. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's more appropriate.
But yeah, like I said, it's I think that is the reason why we so often choose to do things, or why our motive is the approval of other people, because it's just like in the moment a lot more visible and makes you feel good, when everyone likes you.
Yeah. And at that point, like just going back to what Jeff, you read about how Paul told the Galatians, am I doing this to please God or to please man? There's really just 2 options. It's like you're either pleasing God or you're pleasing ultimately yourself, because if you're pleasing man, then you're just really wanting them to view you more highly.
Selfish.
Right. Yeah. And so it's not for them, because I can even, go and like give $50 to someone outside the church right here on the steps in front of whoever's walking by, just so that they can think that I'm a great guy, but that's more about my reputation than it is this guy's like livelihood or, whatever. And actually Grace and I have been watching Sherlock on Netflix, and I won't give anything away, except if you haven't seen it, it's been out for a while, so I wouldn't feel bad anyways. But you see throughout the show that Sherlock doesn't actually care about helping the people that he's solving cases for. He only cares about getting a fix and like demonstrating his wit and his like ability to figure stuff out. And so although all these people are like being helped and their lives are like being restored or cases are being solved and people are in a better spot because of what he's doing for them, he's not actually doing it for them. He's doing it for himself. And so yeah, like is the result the same? Maybe in a lot of situations, probably, but Sherlock, and for anyone else who does things for other people but ultimately for themselves, they're actually still a wicked person, and if I'm doing that, if that's my motive, if why I'm doing things and who I'm doing them for is for me, then I'm still a selfish person needing Jesus to save me and change my heart, not just my actions. Because yeah, anyone can fake being a good person by doing like helpful things, but like that person is still like in need of like a serious heart change from the Lord. And yeah, it's just crazy like what you're saying about like their reward is man's approval. Like that means what their reward isn't is like God's approval, which is pretty scary, There's kind of two things that we had been talking about. One, which we've been talking about for the most part so far, is like God cares about our motive, regardless of like whether we're doing like something good or bad. We still need to like make sure we're doing it for the Lord, because He doesn't just care about our actions; He cares about like why we're doing it. But then I think another way to that like we see motive as important is like God doesn't just care about like cleaning up chairs after church or us praying for Him. Like He's like, God wants my entire life to be devoted to Him. And so Don, you said that verse was in Ephesians?
Yeah, it's Ephesians 6:7, which says, serve wholeheartedly as if you are serving the Lord, not people. And I think that really just goes into, showing, every part of your life you should be doing for God. You shared a story yesterday. I don't know if you want to share that.
Yeah, it's this story where basically this guy is talking to some lady at the church that he spoke at, and she comes up to the front and she says, hey, like you make Christianity sound so easy, and like, someone has a ton of time to do, just follow the Lord, and, I'm a mom and I have to take care of all this stuff at the house, doing laundry, doing the dishes, cleaning up the house, and, taking care of my kids, packing lunches, whatever. She goes on. And then the guy, just when she's done, he just asks her, how much longer would it take you to do the laundry for Jesus? And, it kind of poses this question of like, a lot of being a Christian and being in a relationship with God is just doing the things that you're already doing for Him rather than for yourself. And I just think that's like so cool, because it makes relationship with God, first of all, more like all encompassing of my daily activities. And second of all, not that it makes it easier, but it makes it easier to see how I can live life for Him outside of just explicitly religious things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think one thing that that made me think of was, especially with her, with that case of like doing the laundry for Jesus, it's more of like a perspective change.
Yeah.
Where instead of the laundry basket's full, so I'm going to go do the laundry, it's like you're doing the laundry because you love your family and you want to serve them, and kind of by proxy you're serving God by serving them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It makes me think of a book that I read shortly after coming to college called The Practice of the Presence of God, which is basically like, that's what he talks about in the whole book. He's a monk and he lives in a monastery, as monks do. Because where else would you live? But basically, like, I think his main job is like washing the dishes. Like, he serves in the kitchen. And pretty much everything he does, like, he realizes, like, I don't just have to do these dishes. Like, I can do these dishes for the Lord. And like wherever I go, whatever I do, I can spend time with the Lord while I do these things. And it really like, yeah, it's a good book. And it really does like, it shifted my perspective a ton when I read it. Cause it was like, okay, like, I kind of have to go to class. I kind of have to like do my homework, but like putting it in the perspective of like, okay, like I can do these things and serve the Lord in it instead of just like doing these things out of obligation for like because I'm a student.
Right. Yeah. It makes things that you have to do but don't want to do a lot easier to do.
Yeah.
Although you still may not want to do them, like it makes it easier. Like, I don't know, just having roommates for a very long time. I still have one. She's now my wife. But before I was married, I had guy roommates, obviously. And dishes just pile up. And instead of, like if I'm thinking like, I don't want to do so-and-so's dishes for the, 100th time this year, like instead of like doing their dishes for them, I can do their dishes for Jesus, and it's like, oh wow, like how can you at that point say, I'm not going to do their dishes for Jesus? It's like a lot tougher to say that. So it's not like a matter of guilt. It's like, man, I can actually do their dishes for Jesus and like be excited about it, because I'm like doing this like to serve the Lord. You can do anything for Jesus, as long as it's within the way of life. Like, he teaches us there's some things you shouldn't do at all.
You cannot sin for Jesus.
Yeah. Let's make that very clear.
You can do a lot of things.
I'm just gonna go
Jesus.
Kill a couple people for the name of the Lord.
So just wanted to make that clear. Thank you, Dalton, for that. But yeah, it's just like, I don't know. It just makes things you don't want to do a lot easier to do if you think, man, I can do this for Jesus. One last thing, just that kind of has been in our conversation was just how much knowing someone's motive has to do with like how well you can trust that person, because there's a lot of times where somebody does something where you just really want to assume the worst about why they did it, but I know Jeff well enough to where if he does something that I like don't understand why he would have done it, I can at least say, well, I trust Jeff and I know that he loves me, and so I'm just gonna like assume the best, and like if I need to, like ask him about it. Hey man, why'd you do this? But not, crossing my arms and storming off and saying, screw you, see you later.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can like go to you and like I can assume that there was like, if not a good motive, at least like an oblivious one, rather than like malicious intent. And so like motive is like a huge part of like relationship, that we probably don't like think about a lot, but it actually enables us when we know it, to trust people better.
Mm-hmm. I mean, like the saying is like to choose trust over suspicion.
Yeah.
That's just like, I don't think that's like a Christian term or anything. But really like it's about your motive too, because you have to have the choice to choose to trust the person or to be like, okay, like they did this and I'm going to think that they had like ill intent, like when it came to this action. So like, it is kind of like a two-way street of like, oh, hey, like, I'm going to choose to trust this person. And also I'm going to, since I know them, I know that their motives are most likely, pure and not like malicious in any way.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is crazy. And we don't have the time to like unpack every verse or place where like the Bible talks about, how God cares about our motive, and even like choosing Israel's king in 1 Samuel in the Old Testament. There's a verse that says, God looks at that was backwards. Man looks at the outward appearance, but God looks at the heart. And so, that's like, yeah, that's first of all, in one hand, it can kind of be scary, because like, oh, he knows me for who I am really in my heart, the things that I don't say and do, but the things that I think. But on the other hand, it's like, well, thank you, Jesus, that like, I don't know, it's encouraging that even though he knows those things, the junk I got in there, and like, he still loves me. Like John 3:16, for God so loved the world, that was his motive, that he gave his one and only son, and like, yeah, just his love like for us supersedes the junk in my heart, that he knows that he wants to fix. And so, yeah, it's just, I don't know. Like I said, we don't have time to go like through everywhere, like where the Bible talks about motive. But yeah, we want to like encourage you guys to talk through this stuff, see how motive affects your life. Ask yourself and each other, why do you do the things you do, and who do you do them for? And yeah, just like if you're there, like commit to God, not just what you do, but ask the Lord to help you to do everything for Him, and do things that you're already doing for Him. But yeah, we're out of time, and so we're gonna go ahead and wrap it up. And yeah, if you haven't yet, like and subscribe. It's not a joke. You get notifications when we post our next videos. Check out, there's a document that's going to be attached to the video, as well as the Spotify and the podcast. And so check that out. Look through the questions and the additional resources. Yeah, and this was fun. Thanks, guys, for being guests.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
It was fun. And
Thanks for being my host.
I didn't have a choice. I'm just kidding. This is awesome. But yeah, we'll see you guys later.